Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to continue building out our screens. So just a quick recap, we have our main screen to where you first come in. Actually, we should probably move this up. So let's just move main up towards the top so that way everything is in the order of the flow. And so our main screen, we're going to show the profile. Let me zoom out a little bit. We're going to show the profile, picture, the name, let's get started. So if I hold down my Alt key, click let's go, and we're going to put in the batch number. And then once they put in the batch number, go next. You notice how I was able to proceed without entering the batch number. We're going to fix that in this video. And here I can select a date, click next, and then select the parking lot, click next. Oh, so we have to wire up our next button, but after that, we should be here as far as special types. So two milestones we want to accomplish in this video. One, we want to put the validation at each step. Actually, we're going to do that second. But first, what we're going to do is actually add in our making models, right? So if we go to our list, this is where everything is storing, and these are results that I have that I was testing out, prepping for this video. I'm actually showing that, you know, we actually can store information. But right here on the make and model, we don't have that screen. So let's go ahead and build out the make and model screen to where they can build it out. That make and model list is going to come from this car models list. And basically, there is all the makes of the vehicle manufacturer, and then for each maker, there is a model that coincide with. We wired this up before in the previous video. We're just going to redo this in our Canvas app, more of a wizard-driven format. Okay. Now, one other thing, let me just show this column. This is the make options column. The make options column. If you look at the details here, if I edit this, all of my makes are going to be distinctly or uniquely identified here, right? Which is different from this list. So all of the makes that I have here, oh, Acura's in there twice. That shouldn't be. We want distinct values. So in this, with this distinct value list, that's going to allow us to do this cascading drop down that we need to accomplish with our form. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to do, we have to fix this next button. This is a copy and paste issue error. So this should be going to, when I say next, it should be going to screen 4. And then if I hit previous on here, that should go to screen 2. And then on screen 4, if I hit next, that's actually going to go to screen 5. We're going to create that. And if I hit previous, this should actually go to screen 3. So we just want to make sure that our logic is correct when our previous and next buttons. Okay, so now that we have that settled, let's go ahead and duplicate the screen. And the first thing we do, as we done in the previous videos, we rename our screens and we also rename our forms. That just keep things clean and crisp, and everything's related to the step that you're on. And remember, we generically name these step 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that way, if you're meeting with your client or the business users and they want to rearrange them, you're not tied to that particular item and the flow remains the same. Okay. And that's the reason why we just reminded why we have the naming convention we have with these steps 1 through 5. Okay. So here, I want to select this form. I want to go to edit mode. I want to bring in 2 new fields. I want to bring in the make field, which is a single line text field. And I also want to bring in the model field, which again is a single line text field. And basically these are, even though we want to do cascading drop downs, the storage of these, because you're only going to store one value at a time, is a single line text. We don't need to store this as a choice column, as an example. All right, so now that we have those in, let me just go ahead and move these up into position. So the make will be first, our buttons will be last. Actually, that's the most important. Our buttons will be last. These were carryovers from the copy and paste, so let's go ahead and remove those. And all we should have here is our making models. You really can't see it. So let's go ahead and make our text pop. Again, these are touches we have to do each and every time with contrast because we're going with a dark screen or a dark background. So most of these default values are expecting a light background. So that's why we have to touch these. Okay, so once we have these selected, we actually want these required. So what we want to do is just go ahead and make these required by turning this to true. And this is going to be important when we do our validation because we're going to walk through again and I say again because we went through this in a previous video, we're going to walk through how you can set up validation and how you can customize the validation message. Okay. All right. So once these are selected, let's go ahead and make our asterisk pop here. And then once we go through our validation step, we'll just make sure everything else is set up as required. Now I want to give my button some breathing room. So let's just drop these down a little bit. And as I mentioned before, we still want these in their own custom data card within the form control, because if whatever reason, if we need more space, we can get more space. These data cards are going to be dynamic. That's why I love form controls, because of the dynamic spacing. And because these are part of custom data cards, it will allow those to adjust. All right, so let's go ahead and get our make drop downs in here. So first thing we want to do is hide these default ones that we don't need. And all we're doing is just turn the visibility off. So with this selected, let's go ahead and hit our plus sign, and then bring in the drop down control, hit insert. And you notice one of the things, I kind of brushed over that really quickly, but one of the things I've done is I selected the old text box control. So now I have to go in here and find it, right? And then I went to insert and then search for the drop down and then select it. And the reason why that's key is because if you have that area selected, when you do your insert, it drops it right in the data card where you need it, where it should be. And that's exactly where we want to start. All right, so let's go back to our tree view. Here, let's go ahead and rename these, because these are going to be important. We're going to use them in formulas. So I'm going to prefix, because it's a drop down control, I'm going to prefix it with a DD. And then let's just call it makes. And I'm going to do the exact same here for models, rename it DD models. All right, so now let's get some values for this thing to show. So in order to get some values, this is pulling from a different list. This is pulling from that car models list. So I'm going to have to bring in car models as a data source. So I click on the data source control, search on SharePoint, because I'm telling it I want a SharePoint data source. And it's forcing me to look at the, come on. Yeah, that was weird. That was weird, right? It forced me to look at the common data services, which we, up until this point, we do not touch. That's just one of those things. If you go common data, the CDS or DataFlex is new name. If you go that route, your licensing requirements go up exponentially per user. Okay, so here I have the SharePoint data source selected. I'm in the equipment request subsite, and then I want to select my car models list, and that's going to bring that in. Now, once I have that in, I have this control selected, and it's looking for my items. So basically what we want to do is bring in car models. Here we go, car space models. And we want to bring in the model options. Model options. Interesting. Is it S? I'm looking for the model options site column. How come this is not working? Make options, because you have to say makes and not models. So I'm going to bring in my make options site column. Let's just look at this. I just want to make sure we're clear, because we did not build this list together. So I want to make sure it's clear what we're dealing with. And a better view will probably be this list settings view. So if you look behind the scenes where all these columns are defined, make options is a choice column. If you click on that, as I showed you before, it's going to have all the distinct values for my makers of all these vehicles, right? So that's why I want to bring in as a data source. So to bring that in, because I don't want to bring in the value of the site column, which is what this is going to do if I leave this selected. I want to bring in the choice options that are defined in the site column definition. So to do that, I have to use a special method called choices, and then just wrap it into choices. And now what it's going to do is going to look at that column, it's going to bring in the choices, and then if I hit select, actually I don't have to do anything. It's going to bring in all those choices, it's going to bring them in as a table, and there's going to be a value. It has this weird syntax, but it's going to bring them in like this, where the value property is equal to some value, right? That's how it's going to, so I'm going to get an array or a table of records that look like this, okay? So that's just to let you know of what to expect. And most choice columns, especially when you're dealing with the form control, that's the format that they're going to have. So as soon as I do that, you notice that this lights right up. And if I hit the drop down, it has all my choice options as defined in that site column choice collection, right? So now what we need to do is go down to our models, do something very similar, because we're going to pull from that same data source. So this is going to be my car models. And what I want to do, I actually want to filter this where my make is equal to the selected make. So this is going to be a filter. And then the data source is still going to be models. And then the condition of what I'm looking for, so I'm going to do make, which is the site column name, is equal to dd make, that's the drop down that we have, selected, right, dot value. And that's going to bring this in. Now, notice a couple of things to pay attention. And this is why, you know, when you play around with Power Apps and some of these expressions, you kind of get familiar of when you see tables, what to expect. Actually, if you hit this drop down, I forgot about this drop down. This is a new feature. I think this came out probably like 8 weeks ago or 12 weeks ago. But this drop down allows you to kind of get a sample of what's being returned. And I need to load up this drop down. But this table is bringing each and every record for the matching make, each and every column for that matching make record. Say that 20 times. And we don't need that. We only need this model column. So what we're going to do, we're going to call that out. It just says, okay, from that table that was returned, I'm only interested in the models column. And then that's going to bring that in for me. So once I do that, if I hold down the Alt key to test this out, I select the Bentley, and then these are my Bentley models. If I come up here, I select the Buick, these are going to be all my Buick models. So just like that, you have a cascading drop down wired up with a separate data source. This is a separate list that from our request list because, you know, it has, I think it's like 2,100 combinations of makes and models. All right, so now we have this wired up. We have to save it because remember, we brought this drop down control in. It didn't come in naturally or germane with the actual data card. So what we want to do is update the data card, right? These are controls, and this is the data card, is parent, and go to the magic property called update. The update property is the one that says when you click save or when you submit this form, whatever's here is going to get saved in the site column that this data card represents. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the anatomy of the data card, but it's very, very important because you can only start to do very slick things once you understand the anatomy of the data card. Maybe I should just shoot a video just on that, the anatomy of the data card. But the property value is key because this is where you set to say, okay, if I hijack this data card and drop in some custom controls like a gallery or a drop down that's pulling from a separate list or a combo box or maybe a people picker or, you know, whatever the scenario may be, you can still use these data cards that come with the form control and then specify. And you can even add some additional expressions or logic here if you want to save the data or store the data in a special way. All right, so for our intents and purposes, it's very simple. We're just going to take this dd makes and whatever's selected for the dd makes dropdown is what we want to store. Now, again, as I mentioned before, if you look at this record, it's very important to understand. There we go. That's what I was talking about, that value. And then, so the property name is value, and this is the actual value string that's stored. So, and because this is a single line text, I have to go a little bit further, and that's what that red squiggly is saying, to say, hey, you're mismatching your data types. I'm expecting the value, and you're trying to store a record. So to get the value, and I know this name is used many times, and that's not fair, but really is looking for a string value, and I was trying to store a record or a text value. Yeah, so it's looking for a text value, and I was trying to shove in there a record, and that red squiggly was saying your mismatched data type. You're going to see that a lot in Power Apps, where if you're trying to store one data type like a table and it's expecting the record, you're going to get an error. Or if you're trying to store a screen and it's expecting a table or a record, you're going to get an error. And that's just useful, right? Because that just helps you with troubleshooting. All right, so now we have a text, it's expecting the text, and we're good to go there. And now if I go down to my models, I need to do the exact same. Go to the update property, delete all this, and dd models dot selected dot value. All right. Oops. Oh, look at this. Dot model. Oh, this is different. This is different. So this is hold on. Let's check this out. So if I hit selected, it's saying that, okay, this is a record, right? This is the whole name and then value. Notice the property name is different, right? Instead of value, it's called name, and then the value is actually the actual value. That's fine. And then if we do a dot, this is actually my text value. And the reason why this property changed, and this is actually interesting. I don't know if I recall seeing this before spelled out like this, but because this property changed because of the way that I brought in the data source for this items collection. You remember, we had to do this filter on this data source, on this make match, but then we called out and say, I only want the models column. And somehow Power Apps tied this to this and allowed me to select this by name versus dot value, which is interesting. This is something I haven't seen before, but I know we're safe because the most important thing that I'm looking for is the data type that I'm saving, and this is going to actually have the value that I'm expecting for the selection. All right, so so with that, we should be good to go. And this is not going to save. Actually, nothing that we created so far is actually saving to the list because we haven't wired up the save. So this is how we get our cascading down. And now we want to go to the next screen. Let's just see what we have. And our next screen, we need to go to confirmation. So instead of going next, we want to say here, just say submit. And this is actually going to save it. And we need to navigate to this screen here. So let's go duplicate screen, go through our ceremony with renaming. So let's just rename this to step 6, rename our form to step 6. All right, so now we all wired. And then if I go here, if I click submit, we should be navigating to step 6. And for our previous form, we should be navigating to step 4. All right, and I always make the mistake of updating these last, and usually when I start off our videos, we're all discombobulated. All right, so if I hold down the Alt key, it's going to take, I'm actually on step 6. It's just because we duplicate that screen, I get the exact same information. And what do I need from here? I don't really need a form, so I'm going to actually kill the form. And I need my header, so I'm good there. And let's just do a message. So let's just do a simple label. All right, so we have a text label here. And then we're going to say, what should we say? Your request was submitted successfully. Right? And then we want to make this pop. So black on black is not good. So let's just make that pop. Maybe just increase our font a little bit. Let's go ahead and center that in the middle. There we go. Make sure our control is centering the screen. You notice I'm just looking for that dot, dot, dot. Let me know I'm dead center. And then we need a close button. So now let's just say close. So instead of me recreating that close, because we already have a primary button format or style already in place, let me just go and copy one of the existing ones, move that into position, and then change this to close, and then change the on select formula for that. So when you're closing out of a Canvas app, it's just exit. and you actually have a parameter if you want to log them off or whatever the case may be. So we're just going to exit, and that's going to shut down this entire Power App. All right, so the biggest thing we have to do is that we need to come in here in our submit. So before we navigate to screen 6, we need to save the form. Now, forms plural 1 through 6. So like all these forms have to. Oh, we don't have a 6 form. We killed that one. So 1 through 5. All these forms have to be saved because all of the properties that we're setting and all the cool things and slick things that we're doing, we have to save all those. Now, this is where using a form control really starts to show its value. Right, so here we are, step 6, and I'm gonna hold down the shift key and hit enter, and that's gonna give me enough breathing room. So we need a patch, right? Because you can't submit. So let's talk about this really quick. This is gonna be broad stroke, but this is gonna help you out a lot. All the examples you've seen so far, probably unless you've been following my course, is you see a submit form anytime that you need to save a form. So your tendency is going to be to do something like this. Don't do this. I'm telling you this is wrong, but I'm going to show you what your tendency may be based on what you've seen a lot. Your tendency is going to be to come in here and save form 1, and then you're going to say save form step 2, step 3, and you're going to keep repeating this over. And then you're going to test it out and realize that you're missing information. All of your columns are not going to get saved. And the reason for that is because once this save, it saves that item and it's done, because we split this up across multiple forms, but we're only dealing with one item. We're only dealing with one record. So if we look at the parking lot request, this row right here, all of those forms only represent columns on this one row, on this single row, right? And when you say submit form, you're telling Power Apps to, and actually we're doing a create, to say create this, and then it's just going to save one of these. So only one of your forms are going to execute. I actually haven't tested this lately to see exactly what happens. You may end up with 5 different entries with fragmented information saved on different entries, right? So that's a no-no, so that you don't do that. So what you want to do, what you're looking to do, is this patch. Now, if you look at other videos and you look at the patch, what they try to do a patch for each and every item. Each and every control, right? So so if you have a form and it requires 25 controls, you will notice that what they do here, they'll take all 25 controls and then they'll do a site column name, and then they fuse them all together, and you come up with this extremely nasty, hard to maintain patch syntax. You don't need to do any of that. What you need to do is this. Let's do our request data source. So our parking request 4, that's our data source, and I'm following the syntax here, right? Because it's telling you, oh, you're using a patch method. This is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting the data source, and I'm expecting the record. This is where people get caught up. The record is a new record in this scenario, and it's called parking request 4. Defaults parking request 4. The defaults allows us to create a new record or reference a new record in this data source as a new item, okay? And then once you do that, then it's looking for us, say, okay, I have the data source, I have the record that you want, what are the updates? And again, each form, and the updates are gonna be this. So form step 1, dot updates. These are all the updates that's pending for this one form instance. The good news is you can add as many of these as you need, right? So in our case, we need steps 1 through 5, right? I think I have 5 of these here. So I'm gonna copy and paste those, and then I'm gonna just come in here and tweak all these until I get up to 5, right? So 4 and then 5. Now I have a red squiggly because I need to close out my patch statement and then add a semicolon till then it executes the rest. Now once I have this, I'm golden, and I love this format because this is easier to maintain. Trust me, and it's not intuitive because I haven't to date, and we've been using this probably for about 7-8 months now, but prior to finding this, there was no direct reference that this is how you can use the patch when saving multiple form controls. I don't think multiple form controls was a thing, but I'm sure it's pretty popular now. But now, so now we have our patch, multiple form controls. And I love this because when you go to step 2 or step 3, if you're meeting with the client or the business user and they come back and say, oh, we need this other column. Oh, we need to save XYZ. You just add the column to this form and you don't have to touch this. The only time you have to touch this is when you're creating a new step or a new form or screen or whatever the case may be. Adding columns to each one of these, this will manage all of that, which makes it extremely helpful, easy to maintain, and the syntax is easy. It's really, really straightforward. Okay, so once we do that, then we're going to navigate to our form screen. Okay, let's do this. The moment of truth. Save it off and test and see what we end up with. So here we go. Test the parking app. Will this work on the first try? That lets you know when your skills are where they need to be. When you're able to develop a huge application end to end with 0 bugs on the first go. All right, which is impossible. It's not impossible, especially if you're writing the same app over and over and over. Okay, here we go. So let's go. So we're going next is looking for a batch number. We're good here. We're okay with today's date. We're okay with this selection. We're okay with this. Let's just make sure our, oh, you see what happened here? What's going on? Did we not update our screen? Let's see. Oh, and notice that patch is on the last end. So me starting through this and then canceling out is not saving anything, right? Because our submit's on that last screen. We have more work to do. So on this special type screen, we're not navigating to the next screen. So special type screen is at 5, is at 4, is 4. All right, let's look at these. So 4 should be navigating to 5, and it's not. It's navigating to itself, copy and paste there. And in previous, it should go through. Oh, previous is right. All right, so let's just double check 5. 5 should be going to 4. Submit should be going to, once it does our patch, to 6. All right, we're good there. Let's try it again. So in the comments section, while we're loading this up, let me know, are you loving Power Apps or is it frustrating? Do you have experience with some of the previous tech, as in InfoPath or Nintex forms or K2 forms or anything like any of those common ones that were for the older version of SharePoint? All right, so here in the comment section, let me know. So we hit our same error again, but I think that was a refresh error. So let's try it again. Okay, so make and model. So Aston Martin. Okay, rapid. All right, and then we hit submit, and then we're closed. Our exit works. It takes us here. In the browser, this is odd, but when you're on mobile, it makes sense. Okay, and let's check our equipment request list. Hit refresh. Okay, we have an entry. Special type did not save. The other saved though, but special type did not save. Parking lot saved. Aston Martin saved. Data approved and did not save. All right, so let's fix this. Special type did not save. So if I go to special type, 9 times out of 10, so a couple things you want to check. So if you run through this process and you say, damn, I'm missing site columns somewhere somehow, first thing you want to do is go to your submit. Make sure that you have all your forms accounted for. Special type is step 4. So let me go to my submit button again. Step 4 is indeed there. Okay, so it's not that. And plus the other control on the same form did save. Remember, the other option did save. This option did not save. So what we're going to do is look at special type data card 1, double check our update property, and this is our problem, right? We should be saving the selected item from the gallery and not the default value 2, which is the control that comes with it. So easy fix. So we go to gallery, lot options. Ooh, that's why. Oh, this is not named correctly or anything. This was a step that we missed. So here we go, gallery. Let's just call it special types. And then go to our data card, update property, special types. And then we hit submit. And then we're closed. Our exit works. It takes us here. And the browser, this is odd, but when you're on mobile, it makes sense. Okay, and then go to our data card, update property, special types. and then this is going to be dot selected. Now, as you notice, this one, I actually need to save the record versus the value, right? And the reason for that is because the data card that I'm saving into is a choice column. That's why you have that drop down control or icon versus the text box column, which represents a single line of text. So if it's a text box control, the site column 9 times out of 10 is a single line of text. If it's a drop down, then it's something else, more like a choice column or people group field or something like that. All right. And I think that's actually a combo box versus a drop down. All right. So anyway, so we take our gallery, hit select it. That should save now. So we're not going to run through and test it now. We will circle back and test it later. Let's do our validation. All right. So for the validation piece, this is what's going to be required. So we have this, you should be over here. One, your asterisk should be visible and not the default red. Again, because we're dealing with a dark background, we have to deal with that. The other thing is we don't want this to proceed unless this is validated. Now, understand what's happening here. The first thing is for my data card, if I go to advanced here and look at required, you want to make sure that's set to true. Now, if that's set to true, now what you can do is on your next, you can say if form, you want to make sure that the form is valid, right? So if valid, so you just do if, and then what step are we on? We're on form step 1. So if form step 1 valid, I always want to do is valid, right? So okay, if this is valid, then you go ahead and navigate, right? So here I'm gonna just do a comma, delete the extra space, let it navigate. This is what I like to do, only because it's I like to do these logic per line when and where possible, so that way it's very clear. So if it's valid, go ahead and navigate. If it's not valid, watch this. Submit the form. What? Yes, submit the form. Now, why would I do this? Why would I submit the form if I know it's not valid? If I submit the form knowing that it's not valid, it's going to display or show my error message for my data cards. And this is very helpful, and it's counterintuitive, right? Because actually, before you submit a form, you want to see if it's valid. But for some odd reason, Power Apps is backwards in this way, in my opinion. It's backwards in this way because there is no validation check that says, only submit this if it's valid, whereas I'm not doing that. I'm submitting this knowing that it's not valid only for the sake of displaying my error messages. Counterintuitive, not intuitive at all. And they probably have fixed it, and I probably should have checked and make sure that the validation story for forms is a lot different, to where you can confirm a validation before submitting the form, and it's more natural or part of the, I don't know how you solve for this, but anyway, these are the tricks you have to play. So you submit the form knowing that it's not valid only for the sake of displaying your error messages, right? So now if I have this selected, I don't have a batch number in there. I made it required, and I click next, and here my error message pops up. And an entry was not, this is scripted. This is not what we want at all. So we want to customize this. Now, here's the other thing that's not clear at all. It's not clear that the text here has this canned text message that gets displayed. And it's not one of those things where this error message control only is visible when there's an error. This error message control is always visible, but it only shows something when what happens is this is always blank, so it looks like there's nothing there. So it's actually always visible, but when there's an error, the message is going to be part of this property. So in order to customize the error, what you have to do is check and see if that property is blank. So let's do this. Let's put a comma there, or else the IntelliSense will override it. So if this is not blank, let's do some if statements here too. So if this is not, exclamation means not. If this is not blank, then display this error message. our custom. Please enter in the badge number. Got me? And then close all your parentheses so I need that. Wait. Oh, no, you need. So okay, if this is not blank, then display this. I have really too many. All right. And then what we want to do, we want to censor it. You know, at that point, now you can do whatever you need to do with this. You can pop it. You can give it a color that you need and whatever the case may be. And this works out great, especially if you have multiple controls on here. In our scenario, this is pretty straightforward because we're only dealing with one control. So you actually have many different options. But if you have a ton of controls on this one form component, this type of validation check is great. And it's a best practice that don't allow them to proceed and paint themselves in a corner by not validating on step by step. So once I do that, I go next, I'm good. I can actually do it here. Because we are defaulting to the current date, the user does have an option to remove this date. I can't do it here, but if I go into preview mode, they can actually blank this out where there's no date selected, and then click next, and then then you have dirty data. So to avoid that, we want to do the same trick here. So the trick is actually, if I go to the previous screen, copy this. Actually, I want all of this, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make this a little bit more dynamic. So let me go to the next screen, hit Alt next. All right, so he wants to navigate to screen step 3. So if I put in these spaces, okay, so for screen step 3, this becomes a 2, this becomes a 3, and this becomes a 2. Again, our naming convention, again, is helping out. We know that if I'm going to the next screen, my current screen is going to be that number -1. All right, so that allows me to copy and paste, and the logic becomes very straightforward. So again, validate, confirm, see if this is valid. If it's valid, proceed. If it's not valid, submit the form. And submitting the form would allow me to display my message. It will only display the message if you force it to be required. So you got to make the data card required. Oh, and here's another thing, and you will see this in the next video when we start talking about approvals. You do not want to set the required flag on your SharePoint list. That's a no-no. That makes things really ugly when you get to the next step with dealing with Power Automate and trying to do your approval process. This badge number is required, and that's because it's required by default. This is actually the title field rename, so we can actually turn that off here. But you don't want your data source, you don't want your required fields to be set here on your SharePoint list. Because when you go into the update action in your Power Automate, things get nasty real quick. You have to jump through so many hoops to just satisfy those required fields. And most of the times you don't need that. Most of the time you just probably want to set a status, right? There's only one column you want to impact in your flow. And because you make all these required in order to make them required in the Power App, things get nasty real quick. So use the Power App, the property on the data control, to determine when something is required or not. It works the exact same way. So it's not one of those things that, you have holes in your process. It's just, you just moving it up in the stack versus having it on your data source, which causes a lot of problems in the future. All right, so here we turned on the required here. We update our asterisks, and this should work as expected. All right, so we want to customize this again. Again, we want to use our same trick. Actually, let me go to step 1 and copy this. Where's my text property for my error message control? Yeah. This is actually repeatable. That's the one thing we're missing. We're missing reusable functions in Power Apps. We have global variables. We're just missing reusable functions. Once you have reusable functions, I mean, we can really start to do these things once and use parameters to reuse, get the most reuse out of it. All right, so here we go. We don't want to do batch number here because we're talking about date. So please enter and please specify the date needed. or something like that. So specify the date needed. All right, so we got that. And so we go, what do we need? We need to center this. All right, so now we're good to go. All right, so now we're on to the next. So here, that's going to stop us. We put in the date. Now we didn't validate that it's a future date. And that may be that's a vulnerability, but we're not going to tackle that. And I haven't really figured out a clean way to do that. What in the world is going on here? I haven't figured out a clean way to do that. Wait, why did my whole control disappear? Wait, what? My whole date control disappeared after I selected a date. Where's my data card? What's the visibility on this data card? Is visible true? Did I fat finger something? Or is Power Apps not showing me the whole screen? Hold on, let me go into preview mode. Wow, this is weird. No, something's off. Let's just try to zoom. Okay, this is where you save everything and you get out, you refresh your browser, and you come back in. All right, let's kill this. I think it's tired. Hold on, let's go close. All right, so let's go back here. Let's go back to edit. And let's just rehydrate our Power Apps Studio. But yeah, I mean, it's a few hoops you have to jump through when dealing with Power Apps, but it's worth it. It's well worth it. The business value that you add to an organization with the Power Platform in general is second to none. Is second. I would almost argue that as a developer, as an Office 365 developer or SharePoint developer, you should double down on understanding Power Apps and Power Automate and Power BI versus, now hear me, versus SPFx web part development. You're gonna the value add is extraordinarily higher in the Power Platform than it is creating a custom SPFx. And the reason for that, part of the reason for that is, one, there's the out-of-the-box web parts, or the modern web parts, are feature-rich and extremely powerful, highly configurable, highly reusable in many different scenarios. And Power Apps automates business processes that can be tangibly measured in saving money and saving time. And so the value is exponentially higher in a Power App Platform development solution than an SPFx web part solution, hands down. And I'm open to debate that. All right, so here we go. How would you do a validation check here, right? This is a different beast. We're dealing with a gallery. Now, we can't, I'm gonna be transparent. I tested this out like 5 different, and spent like an enormous amount of time. I spent like 2 hours just on this one piece. And what I concluded was the best validation for a gallery, especially in the way that we're configured, the way we're set up, is to validate on when an item is selected. And when you do an item is selected, you're not going to validate that because there is a selected item property off of the gallery component. You're not going to use that because for whatever reason, it's not clean. When the item is not selected, it doesn't return null. I think it returns as an empty record. So it passed our null check, which made things buggy and unpredictable and not consistent. So in order to be consistent, what we have to do, if you look at how we were wired, or how we're wired here, and if you look at the on select for the image component, we're setting this variable, right? We're setting this variable for var select. We have one for the other gallery for that option as well. So this variable, when you first load this in, if there's not a selection, this is going to be empty. And once they make a selection, it's going to be the selected value. That's what this means. So let's use this. So we're going to use this. And so because we're using this, we don't have the same, and you can wire this up. I mean, you have to get a little bit creative with the error message and things like that. So here I'm going to do a different validation approach. What I'm going to do is go to my next button. I'm going to look at that, use that variable, And I'm gonna go to the display mode for my next button, and I'm actually have this disabled. So this is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna go in here. Let's bring this down a little bit. So we're gonna say if this variable. So let's do is blank, or because this guy right here, this method right here helps you. So if selected lot, right, is blank, then display mode should be disabled. And this is going to give us a nice visual. It actually does a couple of things. It gives a nice color indicator that the button is not enabled, meaning that usually it implies that you have to do something, from a user perspective. And it also gives us a different color, right? So it blocks it, like you can't even click it, right? So the button won't respond to anything. Your on-click event for that button doesn't fire. And then also it has a different color. So it's a nice visual to the end user that they have to do something. Now, I screwed up our test case because I've already selected something, but let's do this. Let's go to the next screen. I'm not going to select anything, and I'm going to drop in the very same formula, or very similar formula here. So let's go to display mode, and here, let's come here. Let's do our if, and then var, no, is blank, check, var special, check. And then if it's good, no. If it's, did I go backwards with that logic? All right, if it's not good, disable. And if it's good, do edit mode for the button. All right, and then let's go ahead and delete this. All right, so now we're good. So now if we look at this, you notice that I have my disabled button, and then as soon as I select something, hold on the Alt key, I get my other, which is good, and then I light up, right? And I probably want to add an additional logic here that says, only light up. If you select other, then here's the other thing that you have to make sure that is selected, right? So you can put that logic in. So next, we can, we want to validate this one, and then for this one, I think I'm going to just use the same form trick. Now this is going to be tricky because I have this big old patch statement that I have to account for, right? So again, same logic. If, let me see, which form am I on now? Okay, so I'm in form step 5. So if form step 5 is valid, then proceed with the patch and save and navigate and all this other good stuff. Now here's the thing that you want to be aware of. This patch is going to execute, right? And then you notice the semicolon and then the navigate. So in my if statement, if it's true, I need all of this to happen, right? And the way that I make sure that this navigate patch happens after the, this navigate screen transition happens after the patch is you want to separate, even in the if statement where things are separated by a comma. If you want everything to execute in that first attribute, you notice that I'm still highlighted there, the true parameter. If you want everything in that true parameter to execute, separate those commands by a semicolon. Then all of that will execute if true. And if it's false, then we just want to submit and then display our error message, right? So submit the form and only submit form step 5. And then close it down. All right, and that's it. That's it. So once we have all that wired up, if I don't have, and to be honest, this is not going to work. This is not going to work, and I'm going to save it and show you why. But it's good to have. I mean, it's a validation check, and you always want to have validation checks. We didn't customize the error message, but we walked through how to do that, so you can take that on as a extra off-site exercise. All right, so let's do. I'm confused here with all these screens. Okay, this is the one I want. So let's go here. Let's kill everything to the right. Why does it ask me if I want to leave? Okay, so I'll click on here. All right, profile pic. This is not gonna, let me do an F5. I know that trick. All right, so let me go here. Let me go next. There's my validation message. Good. Hit next again. If I wipe this out, again, just confirming validation. Hit next. There's my validation. Oh, we forgot to make this pop. So we can go back and make that pop. That's not valid. Let's do a valid validation. And that's the thing, like, the only validation we're doing is like make sure it's not empty or null value in the case of a date control. But you know, we're not validating that it's a future date. We're not validating that it's an actual valid date. I'm still playing around with a nice pattern to make that work. All right, so here my button is grayed out. That's great. As soon as I select something, it's enabled, and then click next. Same here. As soon as I select something, it's enabled. Then click next. Select my vehicle. Then submit, and then I'm done. Hit close, and then it kills it. All right, so the biggest question is, did everything save? So if I go to the parking lot 4, this is number 1. Special type did not save. Special type other did not save, which makes sense because I did not select other. I select EV charger, and I got my parking lot. I got my vehicle, the Bentley Continental. I need a big space for that. All right, now maybe I should select other and say I need an extra long for this one. And that's good. So we're saved. We're good. We're wrapped up. This was a meaty video, a huge 50-minute video, 55-minute video, whatever the case may be, but well worth it. And now we're wrapped up in our series. Let's talk about what's coming next, because I think this is, from when I'm reading in the comments and how you guys are feeling, I think you kind of comfortable with the Power Apps thing. I think you kind of got that under your belt. Let's start talking about Power Automate and what's a common ask. The common ask is this. Let's go here. Let's go to, actually, let me go to my home screen. So let's go to our home screen. Let's go to new, create a list, approvers. So parking lot approvers, right? So I'm wiring this up for our next video. So in our parking lot approvers, we're gonna need the approver. So here's, see, I don't know if I can reuse this title. Yeah, geez. Let's just use this for type. All right, so let's do this. Let's rename this to type. Just imagine that we rename. I hate renaming it here because it doesn't rename it in the back end. But let's just say type. Right. So click save. And oh man, approver type. All right. So let's just do this. Just bear with me here. So this is going to be approver type. The next one we want to do is why did this have to be a choice column? Oh, choice. Parking lot, right? And then parking lot is going to be, I have to go and get them. So red, blue, executive, whatever it is, I have to go and get them. I have to go get the right values, right? So parking lot. So for this lot, I need to say who the approver is going to be, right? And this is going to be a person field. So approver, right? So now what we can do, and then so approver type is either a parking lot approver or it's going to be a parking option approver, right? So this is going to be another choice field. Let's just say special type. And this is going to be EV charger, because there's a different approver for EV chargers and stuff like that, right? So our EV charger, we need a Tesla charger, other yada yada yada. We'll come back and fix this up, and we want to make sure it's streamlined. Okay, so this is how it works. So when I go new, approver type is going to be parking, and for the approver for the red parking lot, I need to have Madison approve that. Right, she's in charge of the red parking spot. She manages that. She's going to be in charge of that. And then for the other parking type, for the blue one, that's going to be Andre. Andre's in charge of the blue one. Oops, sorry. Andre's in charge, and we can probably clean up the screen a little bit. So Andre's going to be in charge of that. And we'll talk about how to clean these screens up. All right, so now if I go to the other type is let's just say chargers, right? So for chargers, so for EV chargers, it's going to be Who's in charge of the EV chargers? Kevin. Kevin's in charge of the EV chargers. So okay. And then for the Tesla chargers, we have, I'll just say chargers again. I don't know if we're going to use this title field. For the Tesla chargers, we need to contact Christian. He's in charge of the Tesla chargers. All right. So that's how this is our approver list, right? So these are, so as you can guess, or as you can see what I'm trying to imply. If you select the red parking lot, it needs to go to Madison, and then Madison is going to say yay or nay. If Madison says yes, and you selected a EV charger, then Kevin's going to get the notification to approve it. And then you got many different combinations on how this can work, right? So I'm gonna show you when you start talking about Power Automate in the next video. When I'm gonna show you how to make your approvals dynamic in the sense that if the red parking lot should have a different approver and it's not Madison, we can come in here in this list and change it, and we don't have to touch our Power Automate flow. That's where we want to get to, right? The static approval process, and this is how most of us start out, especially when we're green to this and we're just still trying to get our feet wet. We hard code this into the Power App, the Power Automate flow, and any changes becomes a change to the flow, and then you have to republish it. And you will see once we start getting into these flows, things get nasty real quick. It takes up a lot of screen. You thought using Excel required big monitors and spread out for very complex Excel files. Try Power Automate flows. You're going to need a 60-inch 4K monitor, and you probably still only see half of it. But you can cut most of that down if you get dynamic in how you set these up. That's going to be the next series. Setting up these Power Automates to where they're, one, easy to manage, and two, they're dynamic, meaning that you can make these changes and make these configurable options, and really handle some very complex scenarios with not a lot of work from a definition of Power Automate. All right, that's it for this video. Any questions, please hit me up in the comment section. As most of you guys know me, I am very active in comments, and I try to answer your questions as soon as I can. And until then, I'll see you in the next series. Take care.